Jumping Jesus on a pogo stick, it's time for full disclosure. Full disclosure, news and commentary number 69. It is a dark and stormy afternoon here in Florida. So if you hear a thunder rumbling, that's what it is. If you see the lights suddenly go out, that would suck. It is full disclosure number 69, and the 14-year-old in me is super laughing right now. I don't have a real 14-year-old inside of me. I'm not getting caught up in the speaking out movement. It's not happening. Wow, that was wildly inappropriate. This is going to be a crazy, crazy edition of Full Disclosure. I'm going to have a bunch of video clips, and I'm just going to have a good old time. What is our commentary about? Way to lose your place, Steve. Jesus. What is our commentary about? Our commentary is about the experts in wrestling who are spouting off more than ever, and how a lot of them are completely full of shit, and how you should check them, including and perhaps especially me. All right, thank you to Dan and Joe Black and Jeffrey and Derek and Brett and Diana and Larry, Southern Honor, Rob Rod, and Brian. By the way, that Larry, that's not that one, it's the other one. And then, of course, Eric, Viral Pro Wrestling, and the OG Myron for their additional support. Wonderful, lovely. And for all the people who have been asking, should I sign up for the Patreon? Yes, motherfucker. Just fucking sign up. Thank you. What's going on? Tommy Sawyer, that was his work name. Joe Cooper passed away at an SWA event. Larry Goodman, thanks to really James Boulevard, gave him the details. That's up on gwhnewsandnotes.blogspot.com. Very sad. It's one of those things where I got the impression people didn't want to say anything about it right away because they didn't want to cast aspersions on the show or bring down any kind of heat and that kind of thing. I mean, he's a 55-year-old guy who smoked, who hadn't wrestled in a long time. And it's the kind of show where they're not going to tend to regulate that kind of thing. It is what it is. I won't say anything for now beyond that. Very sad that he passed away. I feel very badly for his family and friends. Just terrible. Just really terrible thing. Kudos to, as apparently when he was being taken to his car, he passed out and they called for the ambulance right away. So kudos for the wrestlers who did the best that they could as soon as they could. I really appreciate that, because we've had a number of instances in Georgia wrestling, some of which I've talked about on Patreon in the past, where action wasn't taken for different reasons, and it possibly cost people their lives. So kudos to the wrestlers who called the ambulance right away, and all of that. Cool. Renegade Championship Wrestling. Let's just jump into some wrestling news. Drew 68. Pro South keeps rolling along, right? I mean, when you look at, boy, might as well get the controversial stuff going. Let's be real. When you look at who the top promotions are right now in Georgia, in the sort of realm of Georgia as well, because Pro South, they're Alabama, but you know, they get probably more coverage from Georgia wrestling history than anybody. And when you look at who the top promotions are right now, fucking brace yourself. And we all know the reasons that factored into this. But the simple fact is, you're looking at Pro South, Southern Violence, Renegade. They're the ones running on the steady. They're the ones doing their shows. And So right now, they're at the top.
Well, Dick, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellence, and nobody can hang with my stuff. You know, I'm just a big, hairy American winning machine. If you ain't first, you're last.
It's fucking hard to deal with. I get that, but that's where we are, right? Anarchy did one of my favorite things during COVID, which was the empty arena thing. And then they did that thing outside that, let's be honest, I don't think it went nearly as well. I mean, they had a paying crowd, so that part was great. But, you know, I watched the show. Now, granted, I had to watch it through somebody's camera, but the event certainly didn't generate the kind of buzz and anticipation and interest that the empty arena did. And we have no idea when they're going to do another show. Viral has said that they don't know when they're going to do another show. AWE, who was one of the first groups, again, let me put them out there for praise. They were one of the first groups who responsibly said, we are not going to run definitively. And then recently, after the last full disclosure, and I'm not saying it's because of that, but possibly it was, they put out another more detailed sort of press release saying that they don't know when they're going to run. And I get that. Right? Here's the shows that are going to run. So, you know, Larietto is now on September 12th after pushing that show back, and they're going to be part of Impact Plus. Southern Fried is this Saturday, right? August 1st. And then Southern Honor is on the 28th, and they put out their press release about how now they're not going to sell tickets in advance because they don't know what the deal is. They wanted to assure people that they are going to run, but they don't know if they're going to have to run outside or what the deal is. And here's what I was reminded of. And, you know, and there's a number of other groups, right, that we just assume are done. I mean, Pro Wrestling Circuit, I just assume they're done. And they were a group of note that ran. So a lot of groups and a lot of promoters and a lot of this kind of thing in the last 3 or 4 months have talked a lot of shit, and put a lot of shit up politically and acted like they were fucking in the know and acted like, don't worry, we're the fucking biggest and the best and we're going to be back and blah, blah, blah. You know, you're welcome, Georgia Wrestling, basically, that they're going to be back and blah, blah, blah. Like, humility and fucking the lack of hubris, that is in order. Because right now, the groups that are running and keeping the fucking dream alive, and I mean, and action as well, like they try to run, but then they can't, and blah, blah, blah. And these are all the groups that are quick to point out the fucking flaws of others and have been very outspoken about, you know, these are shit shows and we're great and blah, blah, blah. Well, fucking guess what? Pro South, Southern Violence, Renegade. Those are non-shit shows. Some would argue otherwise. But I will say they're non-shit shows that are running on the steady and showing everybody else how they can do it. So all of these big groups that have talked all this shit, and I mean, some of them have said COVID's a fucking hoax and this is bullshit and we should be able to do this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm here in Florida, fucking Spike Central, right? But you know who's in the top 4? Fucking Georgia. Spike Central. So all of these groups with their promoters and the people who are supposed to be the most responsible, who have implied or said outright that shit was nothing and it was no big deal. But, you know, the health of the boys and our fans is primary, but didn't really fucking mean it. Right now, you're looking dumb. So my advice in the future is to watch the shit you talk, because as we're seeing, shit most definitely has fucking come back to bite you.
Well, they can get a whole lot worse. So we're not going to fight anymore. We're going to pull together and we're going to find a way to get out of here. First, we're going to seal off this.
a little humility is in fucking order. Right? And in that spirit, the commentary is about how the people who discuss wrestling fucking need to check themselves as well, myself included. And speaking of humility, from the boys' perspective and wrestling promotions that have been really quick and fast about the speaking out movement, Black Lives Matters, and now the crusade about, child molesters and people who've been convicted of sex crimes, and we need to fucking get them out of the business unless you do business with them, and then we fucking ignore that. Like, again, there's so much selectivity going on, right? There's people who are out and out racists who promotions and wrestlers nonetheless don't have problems promoting their things on those sites because those sites are helping to promote them. So we'll deal with them. That's okay. And there's certain promotions in Georgia and Alabama that have blatantly racist fucking promoters, but all of y'all fuck with them still. I mean, what's it gonna be? What is it?
You must have thought it was White Boy Day. Huh? It ain't White Boy Day, is it? Oh, man, it ain't White Boy Day.
It shouldn't be White Boy Day, but apparently it's White Boy Day. When it's to your self-interest. Now, some will get mad about this and go like, oh, Steve, what do you mean? Why don't you call out people specific? I don't have to fucking call these dudes out. I fucking see it. And then I see all this shit about, like, we're going to go after this person who I don't directly do business with. But anybody you do directly do business with, blind eye like a motherfucker. Hypocrisy is a motherfucker, and y'all got to get rid of it. Got to get rid of it. That's my rant. That's promoters, that's wrestlers, that's all of it. As we're rolling into this new era, and that's exactly what it is. We don't know what this is going to bring. We don't know the kind of crowds people are going to draw. We don't even know what the rules are going to be and whether people are going to be allowed to run. Can we fucking roll into this new shit with a bit of a clean slate and a lack of hypocrisy? Because a lot of the people who are purporting to be leaders on this shit are the worst fucking perpetrators of the hypocrisy. And that's a problem that's going to blunt the movement. And it's going to blunt your ability to be taken seriously, not just by wrestlers and fans, but by everybody. And that's not good for anybody's business. All right. So this sort of dovetails into that. So Joey Ryan, because did Joey Ryan go on the fucking speaking out cross? So now that shit doesn't matter anymore? Is that what we're doing? So now that we nab the worst of the worst, which is Joey Ryan, and he had the nerve to put out, God, if you haven't watched his hour-long apology that's not an apology, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's fucking ludicrous. But now that Joey Ryan has died on the fucking cross of the speaking out movement in wrestling, so now all the other shit, it just kind of skates. So the people who stepped out, like Dave Lagana, or the people that got fucking destroyed, like Joey Ryan, and I say destroyed as if he didn't deserve it, but he did deserve it. So all the other ones who kind of came up suspect, and all the other drama and all the other shit that came about as a result of this, where we had to turn a questioning eye towards even accusers and the people with the accusers, we don't want to go through all that work, do we? So Joey Ryan died on the cross of speaking out and washed away everybody else's sins? Just asking a question. Nick Aldis, the NWA champion, who, for different reasons, and I put out videos about this before, about the weird booking tactics that the NWA was doing with him and how they were kind of screwing promoters over or whatever. Nonetheless, Nick Aldis is the one, because I've said NWA is one of these groups that you don't know what the fuck is going on with them. And the only news that you heard about them was, are they going out of business? And then Billy Corgan looking mad fucking unprofessional, just fucking wearing his stupid shit and like, no, we're still in business. Like, nobody was convinced of anything. But Nick Aldis has come out and said some great things and been a great representative, and he's their champion. And I think they should be very proud that he's their champion. And recently, when Bruce Pritchard sort of took a swipe at him as like, he doesn't have the it factor, Nick Aldis, bless him, fucking fought back, took a swipe at the WWE's falling ratings in the process. What it made me think of is this. One, I think Nick Aldis is acting like a champion should, which is you represent not just a title belt, but you're supposed to be the leader of your promotion. And he's acting like it. So I'm going to give credit where credit's due. And is this a Georgia story? It's a wrestling story, first of all. But it is a Georgia story because where does the NWA tape? And where are we hoping they continue to record? Is in Atlanta. So good for you, Nick Aldis. You should be proud of yourself. Another guy who should be proud of himself, who is local, is Tyler Rivera, who shall be Tyler Rivera no more, but Tyler Culprit. I think the job that he's doing, reinventing himself, I'm curious to see what it is. I'm curious to see what he does. It's certainly different and it's interesting, and I think he's taking a step of moving away of looking like just another indie garage guy. Good for fucking him. And Hold My Beer Hansen's campaign to get into fucking Rumblejack, I haven't spoken on it before. I'm going to speak on it now. I think it's fucking great. I'm not going to tell Southern Honor what to do with their shit. I will say that the reaction of Gary Lamb publicly about the Hold My Beer Hansen stuff is coming across mighty arrogant and not in a good way. That's my take. But good for Tyler getting the shit out there. Good for Hold My Beer Hansen, who's fucking probably doing as much or more to promote Rumblejack than fucking anybody. Good for him. Fucking hustling, working. I see you guys. Proud of the work that you're doing. Yeah, it's fucking dope. Dope as shit. And I've gotten word about a lot of people who are going to be on AEW Dark soon. Excited about that. AEW Dark tomorrow apparently has 12 fucking matches. They're fucking trying to kill me. But I'm still going to cover that shit. I love it. And it's some of those matches on AEW Dark, okay, if you're under the impression that it's Squash Match City, not tomorrow's show. Holy balls. They have like a triple threat tag team thing with like fucking SCU and Private Party and fucking Santana and Ortiz. I think that's right. Fuck me. That show, it's coming on. AEW's coming on. Exciting, exciting, exciting. Somebody brought this up to me, that they've noticed that fans and wrestling people have created this sort of dichotomy with how they talk about individual pro wrestlers that they didn't like because they think it's fallacious. We're just going to cover it here instead of doing it in an Ask Platinum. They talk about a wrestler's like, are they character first or are they like in-ring wrestler first? Here's the answer that you should be trying to attain. That shouldn't be a fucking question. Oh, they're a great character and their in-ring's okay. Or their in-ring is primary and then they don't really have a character. Fuck that shit. Have both. Chris Benoit, at his most wrestlest, had both. You knew who that guy was. And it fueled the wrestling. But they worked in lockstep, whether people thought they did or not. And if they didn't think it did, then you know what? Then they were really buying into his gimmick. The best have both. And the best if you stop and think about it, one does not supersede the other. That's where all of you need to get. When you don't notice something, I was talking to somebody who's very smart last night, and they pointed out something, because we were talking about like the best referees and offensive line. It's like offensive linemen. If you don't notice them doing their job, then they're doing a great job. But I think that if you can't make the distinction between somebody being a character first wrestler or a wrestling first wrestler, then they're really doing a great job. Something to aspire to. Let's get into the commentary. Specifically, I'm not going to talk about Dave Meltzer, because I think Dave Meltzer, there are definitely cracks in the foundation with Dave Meltzer. And maybe I'll go into it at some other point. I'm more interested in the commentators who I think are much more interesting and influential at this stage in the game. I'm not going to talk about Brian Alvarez either. Big fan of Brian Alvarez. I think they do good work there. They're the ones I tend to listen to the most. But they're not the ones that the boys tend to listen to the most, right? When people write me or I'm discussing wrestling with people, they're talking about Disco, Conan, and Cornette for the most part. So first, let's talk about Conan. That was Psychosis 2 slapping the shit out of him. Conan certainly tries to not be biased, but he also assumes that he has a lot. And he's the one who's not afraid to say, I don't know who that is, when somebody else on the show brings up somebody and he doesn't know, he asks. So I like that about Conan. That's the big pro about Conan, is when he doesn't know something, he asks about it. The big con, though, is he gets an idea in his head and it doesn't matter. And sometimes he's contrary to just be contrary. Anybody who tries to argue that Brawl for All on any level is an idea that could work and is great, go fuck yourself. Like, if we can't find common ground and say the worst shit in wrestling history is the worst shit, what the fuck are we doing? It doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't help anybody. Conan also tends to feed off of Disco too much. Speaking of Disco.
Against Scott Hall. Hall is heading up, though.
I really hate him, so I fucking made sure I got the fucking choppity chop in. That guy's just so full of shit. It's an endless stream of a guy who, because I did all this great shit. Really? He booked great shit? I would love for somebody to tell me something great that Disco ever had a hand in booking. If you're a Russo protege, that doesn't mean that he never has anything valuable to say. It doesn't mean that he's not entertaining when he speaks. I listen to Conan and Disco, but I find myself disagreeing with them almost all the time. And I think to myself, if the boys are listening to this shit and believing this shit and seeing them as a credible source and not just an opinion with which to dissect, that's a problem. So this is me telling the fucking boys and girls out there who are wrestling and in the game, Conan and Disco, fucking not just a grain of salt, a lot of fucking salt when those fuckers speak. But then what about somebody who I do think a lot of and I do think is really fucking smart? What about Jim Cornette? Criticism gets levied at him all the time. I'll say this. Nobody dealt with the speaking out thing better than Jim Cornette. Now, granted, it was bullshit when he was pulled into it in the first place, but his defense, everybody should listen to, because it's textbook. Unwavering, unafraid, unapologetic, but he explains to you with fucking facts and emphasis. He defends first and then he goes on the attack because he knows ultimately he's right and he has facts to support it. Cornette is a detail guy. Cornette's a guy who writes everything down, and Cornette's a guy who has an extensive memory and an incredible wrestling collection and has had success doing different things in wrestling, but not in a long time. And to me, he could be such an asset to the wrestling business if he would acknowledge that things do change and you can change with them instead of just going, when people tell me I gotta change, and fuck that, because there's a right and there's a wrong, and but there's also the social mores. And I was having an argument, and see, this is my defense of me. Am I right all the time? Likely not. But I have people that I bounce my ideas off of. I'm not surrounded by yes men. And one thing Cornette is surrounded by is fucking yes men. One thing Conan and Disco is surrounded by yes men. They have each other too, to fucking stroke each other. What do I have? It's probably no surprise to anybody that the people who fucking talk about wrestling, we talk to each other. And we disagree with each other all the fucking time. And it's good. It's good for me. It's good for me to have guys who, like, you know, I think, to put it mildly, like, I'm a homer for certain things, they're homer for other things, and that creates a nice discussion. Or when some topic comes up in Georgia wrestling, I mean, we just throw it in the middle of us and we all fucking go after it, and we have different takes. And I think it's great. So I would advise that amongst the boys as well. Because a thing that I think has happened that is dangerous is there's too many fucking echo chambers. There's too much. If you disagree, it's about something superficial, like who's fucking better from 96 WWF. I mean, who gives a fuck? Like, I mean, that's good shit to discuss, and everybody discusses that. But I mean, fundamental shit. How to get better. How to deal with criticism. The people, I critique shit all the fucking time. And here's something that's interesting. The people who were my detractors, and probably the biggest fuck Steve Platinum people, are no longer that. Not saying I was right and they figured it out, but there were other people who advocated for me. Like, fuck, because at the end of the day, here's the truth. And people who have accused me in the past of, like, Steve just talks about this to get views. Like, fuck your views. I don't give a fuck about views. Is that not clear? When COVID happened, I tried shit out when shit wasn't working for me or I didn't want to do it anymore. I stopped. I'm about fucking informing. This is for the boys and girls. This is not, I don't do my shit for wrestling fans. What do I always say? Here, say it with me. Fuck the fans. Fuck them. And Cornette caters to fans. His fans. And Conan and Disco are just looking to, they're just looking to be contrary in order to fucking get views. And I get it. I get that game. But I will say that there are people who have a vested interest in you doing better. I recently saw a thing where, like, Ronnie West was bitching about something. He was like, oh, you know, I think it was Noatol / Scott Hensley who put up a thing about, like, you know, be open to listen to criticism, which, ooh, insightful, right? And then Ronnie West goes like, well, when I critique promoters, you know, they just tell me I'm being negative and blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, because Ronnie West's opinion doesn't fucking matter because he's a fucktard. But there are people who genuinely give a fuck about wrestling, who have been involved in it, who continue to evolve with it, who are here to help you. And I'll tell you, very few places, if any place, has resources like you do in Georgia. So take advantage. If you're not listening to the Tapped Out guys, you should be. If you're not reading Georgia wrestling history, you should be. If you're not reading show reviews, even of shows that you're not on, you should be. If you're not taking in Rob Rod shit, you should be. And let me just say this for me. You've got a lot of people to listen to. Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, Conan, Disco, all the rest of these motherfuckers. But I'll say this, none of them are as smart as me, as adaptable as me, or give a fuck about you as much as I do. So, frankly, they can all fuck themselves. I do thank them for having the content, though. Go get them, motherfuckers. This has been Full Disclosure.